Before we get into the video, a couple of safety things we must go through. So first thing, unplug the machine from the power supply. Isolate that plug so nobody else can plug it back in while you're working on it. Wear some safety gloves because inside the machine is some very sharp edges. And lastly, if you're not confident doing this, contact your local repair agent to help you out. In this video, we're going to show you how to remove and replace a capacitor on a tumble dryer. Now, what is a capacitor, you might ask? Well, from an observer's point of view, it's the part that starts the rotation on the motor, which in turn turns the drum. So if you've got a scenario where your drum is not turning, one of the common symptoms you're going to find is you're going to get quite a loud humming noise and the drum's not going to move. Now there's a nice little test you can do that will prove to you that the capacitor is the reason for that fault. And all you need to do is, while the dryer is making that humming noise, if you just take the lid off the machine and just give the drum a very gentle little push with your finger, if the drum starts turning on its own after that point, then you know without a shadow of a doubt the capacitor is the reason why. So then all you need to do is get to that part and change it. So that's the point of this video, is to show you where to find it and how you would change that part. Now, on just about every single make and model out there, the capacitor is nearly always found on the right hand side of the machine as you're looking at the front. And what is a fairly common arrangement with most brands is the side panel comes off, which gives you quite good access to that capacitor. So it's generally quite an easy repair to do. First we'll need to remove the lid, and then we'll need to remove this side panel. So I'm going to reposition the dryer and the camera so you can see the next stage of this repair. Right, so I've already got the lid removed from the appliance. All we need to do is take this side panel off. And what is a fairly standard setup for most brands is there might be a couple of screws in the top, and there'll be 4 or 5 screws down the side or down the back of it there. And then what should happen is, when you get them screws out, this panel should just slide backwards ever so slightly and then come away, lift away from the machine. Very occasionally there can be a screw underneath there, so if you've taken these out and the obvious ones down the back, if the panel is still not moving, then just tip the dryer up a little bit and just have a look underneath, see if there's a hidden screw, if you like. But once you've got all these screws out, panel will come off and then we can show you the capacitor. Right, so that's the last screw out. Now we can pull the panel off. Like I said, it should just come away from the front, then lift away from the machine. So this right here on camera, this is your capacitor. So this is what effectively supplies the power to make the motor turn, which then in turn turns the drum. So if that fails, that doesn't spin and neither does the drum itself. It is a very, very common part to fail on a tumble dryer, and most manufacturers make it relatively easy to get at that part for replacement. So as you can see, once we've got the side panel off, we've got really good access to this part. So I don't know if you can see on camera, but there's a cable tie just keeping all the wires nice and neat and tidy. So we're going to need to cut that, being careful not to cut any of the wires itself. Get that out of the way. And there's 2 connections to it. I generally recommend taking a photograph of any wires before you disconnect them. But the good thing with capacitors is it doesn't matter which way round you get these 2 wires. As long as they both go back on and you've got one on one side and one on the other. And as long as you achieve that, it doesn't matter whether I get that one on that side or that one on that side. As long as one's on one side and one on the other, the capacitor will work. So it's essentially a component we can unplug and disconnect and not worry too much where the wires went in place. Now, how your capacitor is attached is quite universal across all brands. So attached to the bottom of the capacitor is a little threaded bar, and it normally fits through some form of bracket like this, and there'll be a nut that holds it in place. So all we need to do is loosen off that nut. Now, I can tell you from experience, it's what we call a 13mm size. So if you had access to a 13mm spanner or socket, that would work. I just want to try and demonstrate that it can also easily be done with a pair of pliers. So if I just grab hold of the bolt from underneath and just hold the pliers still, that'll keep the bolt still, and then I should be able to just spin the capacitor. Right, so this here is your capacitor. As I mentioned, this is effectively the starting device for the motor. And this is the threaded bar I was talking about, so there's often just a nut that goes through, and in this instance goes through the hole on the bracket and the nut goes underneath. One thing you do need to do is you can get the genuine capacitor from the manufacturer, but these are largely universal, and as long as you match up the size of the capacitor, then it doesn't matter where it's come from, it will do the job for you. But the information you're looking for is you're looking for a big number. So that is a size 9 capacitor. On a dryer they range anywhere from 7 up to 10. And the idea is if you're removing a 9, you need to replace it with a 9. Don't underrate it, don't overrate it, change it like for like. But as long as you can find a size 9 capacitor, then doesn't matter where it's come from, like I say, it will work, it will fit, and it will do the job. So if the capacitor has failed and we need to change it, it's just a case of reattaching it, pushing it through the hole there. And they often have a little washer as well as a nut. So we just need to make sure we get these in position. This can be a little fiddly. I just need to make sure it's tight, so I'm just going to use the same method, the pliers. Just hold it still and just spin the capacitor. That's lovely and tight. So all we need to do is connect the wires, and as I mentioned, as long as you've got one on one side and one on the other, doesn't matter which way around you get these wires. That's that connected. So all we need to do now is fasten another cable tie on there. Now you might think that's not necessary, but you don't really want loose wires anywhere near the belt itself. So I'm going to attach a cable tie just to keep everything nice and tidy. So that just keeps the wires out of the way of the motor, makes them a little bit safer and obviously a little bit neater. So all we need to do now is connect or put the side panel back on and screw the lid back on, and then we should have a successful repair. So just before I put the side panel back on, I just want to show you something which is a fairly, again, like a lot of aspects of a capacitor repair, this is a fairly standard across all brands. So on the front there, there's a couple of, well there's three actually, there's one there, one there, and one there. Little plastic tags, if you like, that are designed to fit through, I don't know if you can see this on camera, little holes on the front panel. So essentially you slide the front panel into there and it kind of locks it in at the front. Like that. Then all you need to do is, if you just get one screw in the back, it'll hold it all together. While you put... So that is how you would test, remove and replace a capacitor on a tumble dryer. So that is how you would test, remove and replace a capacitor found on a tumble dryer. And I should point out, all dryers have a capacitor for the motor. Doesn't matter whether it's a condenser, a vented or a heat pump dryer. They all have the same style of motor, they all have a capacitor, and on all three of them it is a common part to fail. So I hope this video helps.